Have you ever wondered how to square feminism with Catholicism? Or been part of trying to find a good side of feminism to praise and try to distinguish it from bad pro-abortion feminism? Don't you wish there was a different way of speaking about women, the role of women in culture? Well, there is a fascinating conceptualization of this in a book called The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. When the book first came out a couple of years ago, I missed it. But there was a recent controversy over the book which sparked interest because the book just recently became a target of cancel culture. We have with us today the author of the intriguing and apparently very controversial book, Dr. Cary Grass. This is the John Henry Weston Show. Stay tuned. Dr. Cary Grass, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Let's begin as we always do with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. In the intro, I mentioned how your book, already a couple years old, but a book that's very controversial indeed, especially right after the Biden inauguration, has been the subject of some cancel culture. The book is called The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. We're going to get into all of that, but first of all, tell us about this canceling of your book right after the Biden inauguration.
Yeah, well, it was a Sunday afternoon right after the inauguration, and I got a notification from a bookseller that informed me that they couldn't post the book online to sell it. And they had before. They couldn't figure out what was going on. They thought it was censorship. And, I was sort of hesitant. I was like, what's going on? Because they got a message saying it was, it didn't fit with community standards or whatever. And again, it's a 2-year-old book. So I thought, well, maybe it's a glitch. I'm not sure. And then they tried to post it to Instagram and got the exact same message. So I thought, okay, they're obviously owned by the same people. There's something systemic going on here. I put it on Facebook and on Instagram that this was happening, and people just were incredibly supportive and went out and bought the book. It shot up to 242 on Amazon's list. And it was #1 in feminist theory, it's always so gratifying to see it anywhere near the top of feminist theory, because it's sitting next to books called I Hate Men and, all these just awful books. So anyway, that then Amazon sold out of it, and they actually stopped selling it. Those buttons that they have where you can still purchase it, and it says will be available, on May 13th or whatever. That was just taken down, so you could only buy it from a third-party seller, even though we know the publisher had already received an order for them. And we kept saying, can you put these back up? And so Amazon would put the buttons back up, and then they would come back down again, within an hour. So the book just plateaued at 242 and couldn't go any higher at that point, because you're not going to get ratings or rankings for a book that's not selling. So anyway, it was really interesting to see how that played out. So you've got, a 2-year-old book. It's the week Biden is inaugurated, and it's a book on toxic femininity. So it's kind of this perfect storm of a book to be targeted. So anyway, we'll see how it goes from here on out. Amazon has since put the buttons back, the week later. And it's still for sale there, unlike others. But we'll see how it plays out over the coming year for sure.
Well, the great part about all that is that it must be something to be revisited. So the good Lord sees to foil the plans of the evil one. And the powers that be at Amazon might not like a lot of things, and I think felt really empowered with the Biden administration coming in. That's when we started getting warnings about our YouTube channel, and then we're eventually kicked off completely, Facebook cracking down on us, everything else. So let's examine the book. I love the concept. The title is amazing. The concept of the anti-Mary being really toxic feminism today. So tell us about the concept.
Well, it actually came to me when I was writing my book, The Marian Option. And I was looking, it was actually during the election for Hillary Clinton against Trump. And I was looking at Hillary Clinton and looking at how powerful of a woman she was going to be in the culture. But simultaneously, I'm reading about Our Lady and how she, even National Geographic has called her the most powerful woman in the world. And I thought, these two things do not look the same. There's something very, very different about Hillary Clinton than about Our Lady. And it's not just that Hillary's sort of slightly different, but everything that she stands for is diametrically opposed to who Our Lady is. And so that got me really thinking about the culture and seeing just the direction that women had gone in. So I have a chapter in that book called Are We Living in the Age of Mary or the Anti-Mary? And from there, the publisher said, can you just do a book on this topic? And I thought, sure, I can try. And so, we signed the contract, and then I sort of panicked, like, I hope there's enough information. Like, what if I'm just grasping at straws here? And then I got started on the research, and it was like a fire hose of information. It was just amazing how overwhelmed I was. It's one of these things, a friend of mine that read the book early on, right after it was published, said, you can't unsee the Anti-Mary. Once you sort of see it in the culture, it's just so obvious and so evident. And, that's what I found in my research, was just to see, how many awful things and awful representations and distortions of womanhood there are out there, that we're being sold day in and day out and being told this is really what womanhood is all about. So that was really the idea behind it. And, it just ended up becoming a whole book, obviously, but the first half really focuses on this idea of the Anti-Mary. And then the second half looks at who Our Lady is and why we have great hope in her, and why she should be this model of femininity for all women.
So what are some of the ways you suggest to fight sort of the anti-Mary culture that we're experiencing today?
It seems like every time I write a book, it leads to another book. And I've been kind of amazed at how, one response that we could have is to really try and retaliate. And I think that what ends up happening there is we get angry, and we end up looking a lot more like the Anti-Mary than like Our Lady. And I've also was intrigued by the fact that I saw just how the culture was taken down. You have things like magazines, you've got Oprah Winfrey, you've got all of these very saccharine, lovely magazines and fashion and, all these things that women love. And yet all of them were just laced with Marxism, or with just, distortions of sexuality, or with the occult. And that's how the culture has been. Like, they seem very innocuous, but if you look at the layers there, even Cosmo magazine was really set up to be just the female version of Playboy. These are the ways in which women have really been, confused and deluded and led astray. And it's interesting to even see, they're not reading Marx, or they're not reading Margaret Sanger, but these are the ideas that we have sort of picked up through the ether of the culture. So that's really led me to do this work with Theology of Home. I've published 2 books now. We're working on a third on Theology of Home, because we're using beautiful visuals, and we're using our ideas. We're using Catholic ideas to help women absorb these in the same way that we absorb the bad ideas, but in a way that's beautiful and compelling. Because I think few people know that what Catholic women have, we're said to be the most happy women on the planet. And women really want what we have. We have, faithful husbands. We know how, we have families. We know how to deal with stress and deal with when, crosses and turmoil in our lives. And this is what the culture doesn't know. So we always joke about how, in these books, we're putting up pictures of, illicit pictures of, men that really look like men and are good dads and big families and pregnant women, all these things that aren't supposed to be represented in the culture. Because, if you look at any commercial today, it's with a man, and it usually he's an idiot, that the woman has to come along and sort of help him, diaper a baby or clean a kitchen or something. So anyway, we wanted to really just represent truth, beauty, and goodness, but in a way that's very absorbable by women, in a way that we're used to absorbing content.
I should just do one clarification for people. You're not saying that men should never help in the kitchen or should never help change a diaper.
Oh, no, absolutely. No, but I think that's the thing, is that they're absolutely competent. I have a husband who, is a much better cook than I am. Mm-hmm. And, my kids are happy when he cooks when I don't. So no, absolutely. I think that there's room for all of that. But that this is the way that we've been portrayed, is as, men are idiots because men are the enemy, really. That's this lie that men are our enemy and that the patriarchy is bad. And then the other lie, of course, is that women that don't agree with these women, they must be doormats. And so we just wanted to show the opposite of that, something very, very beautiful. that also fits in line with, of course, who Our Lady is as a model of service and humility and motherhood. I think those are important elements that aren't out there.
Now, you have a fascinating account in your book about the way some of this came to be, about a meeting of feminists together. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I interviewed Mallory Millett. Mallory Millett is the sister of the late Kate Millett. Mallory had been writing about her sister since her death and really trying to get Kate's story out because she felt a lot of guilt because she had been involved in Kate's life early on and been kind of a follower of Kate's. And she actually helped name her book Sexual Politics. And Sexual Politics landed Kate on the front of Time magazine. It just made her incredibly famous, but it also was sort of the backbone of all the women's studies programs that are now in universities. So Mallory's had this huge conversion and was really trying to get the truth out about her sister Kate. So she recounts back in the day when they were all living in New York that Kate would host these events, or they'd be in one of her friends' apartments. 12 women sort of chanting this Marxist litany. Kate and Mallory grew up in a Catholic home, so Kate knew what she was doing, both with a number 12 women, but also with this litany. And this litany was really part of this, Maoist consciousness raising, very Marxist ideas of how do we destroy the culture. And, I don't know if you have it there in front of you, if it's easier for you to read it, or I can just describe the gist of it. Ultimately, what was behind their effort was to certainly destroy the American family, to destroy men, to destroy the patriarchy, to destroy all of these things that were valued in the culture at that point. And they did it through promoting promiscuity, homosexuality, prostitution, all of these things that at that stage were really not mainstream. And you read this final line of their litany, and it's just amazing to see how successful they have been in destroying all this. And, it's interesting to even think about how even just last week, Madonna was put something up on Twitter, something like "death to the patriarchy." Madonna's worth $850 million and somehow is blaming her lack of success on men somehow. But it's just fascinating how successful these 12 women were in spreading out this idea that the patriarchy is bad. And so it's now just shorthand. Any woman can complain about the patriarchy and somehow everybody's like, oh, well, she's right. Or, it goes completely unquestioned 50 years out from that event. So it's really amazing to see just how successful these 12 women were, because of course they went on to again form these women's studies programs. They were all involved in NOW and NARAL and all these different ways that have destroyed the culture. So it's very sad. But Mallory, on a different note, was because she was so helpful. At one point we were talking about the title of the book, and she said, "You've got to put toxic femininity in it." So it's pretty amazing to see her go from, 50 years ago naming her sister's book to, almost 50 years to the day helping me name my book. I know that it really felt like that was an incredible, grace that God showed her, how much she's transformed who she was at that time. So
wow.
Anyway, but yeah, very sad roots. And of course there was an occult element to it as well. This wasn't just, Marxism, but there was also very much an involvement in the occult in these women and a desire to just erase men altogether, to really see lesbianism as the pinnacle of creation, or, that was the goal to be aimed towards. So it's very sad realities in these lives, especially because most of them had major issues with their own parents, especially their mothers. You can kind of see this across the board. There was a book that came out shortly before I published mine that was so insightful in this. And I don't think it was meant to be insightful in the way that I was using it, but it was just really revealing as to how broken these women were.
You're writing a book about traditional motherhood, about the value of motherhood, of women in the traditional sense. People are going to think, oh my gosh, she's the throwback to the old ages. I want them to get to know a little bit about Cary Grass. Who is Cary Grass and why would you write such a thing?
It's funny because I think that is the reaction, because we've been conditioned to think that that's the reaction, that if you're not with the culture today, then you must want things to go back to the 1950s. And, I look at the 1950s and I say, the 1950s had to have some serious, maybe they had this veneer of looking lovely, but there was some serious pieces missing, because you wouldn't have had the 60s be such a disaster if the family had been in better tact, if the faith had been in better tact, if people knew their faith better. So I'm never really advocating for going back to that model. But I grew up in Oregon, actually, very liberal state. And I think in many ways it probably just turned me off because I saw the way people's lives were destroyed by rampant drug abuse and, just living without God. And so then I had this deep conversion. My father passed away, and I asked all kinds of questions as a teenager, trying to figure out what, like, reconciling his death and who I was and all these questions. And ultimately was really answered by the church and just led me in this incredible journey to find the faith and the truth of it and come to know Our Lady and all of that. But in the meantime, I just started studying philosophy. So I ended up finishing a doctorate in philosophy at Catholic University. Actually finished it after my third child was born. I worked on it in labor and delivery because I was told I wasn't going to finish it. So I was like, I'm going to finish it. I don't care how it gets done. And so I finally finished it after my third child was born. But I've also lived in Poland and in Rome, working as a journalist and doing all kinds of different things. I lived in France. I lived in Washington, D.C. and was actually George Weigel's assistant for 3 years. And so anyway, it's been just an amazing life. And then finally I met my husband. We were both older when we got married, and we've been blessed with 5 children. But I don't think that we really fit the 1950s model at all, because, we're both 100% all the time between all the things that we're doing and just, caring for our children. And, I certainly couldn't do it without him. He's an amazing man. And it's both of us working really hard together to do the things that we've done as a family and professionally and otherwise.
Awesome. And on a final note, Cary, let me just ask you about Our Lady, specifically your relationship with Our Lady and how she's helped in your life and how you feel she might help today's woman.
This is a very long, I could talk about this probably for about 2 hours, so I'll try and keep it somewhat brief. But the first thing that I struggled with in terms of talking about Our Lady is that she seems really inaccessible to a lot of women. We can think of her as just a statue or very pious, and she's perfect. So how do you relate to the perfect woman? And so I went back to look at what are the desires of every woman's heart. And every woman desires to be known and loved. She desires to do the good, and she desires to be beautiful. And certainly these things can become distorted. They can be used in the wrong ways. Even these women that you look at radical feminism and you see what these women were doing, they thought that they were actually doing very good things. But you can see this desire to do the good deep in them. It just was obviously very misguided and distorted. And beauty is the same way. That's been turned more twisted into a kind of control and manipulation with our sexuality or vanity. And yet Our Lady has all of those factors. We can see that she's got this desire to be known and loved, but it's completely fulfilled because she knows the Father. She's loved by him. And that's where everything else flows out of that. So her goodness, of course, is perfect goodness because it's in accord with God's will. And her beauty is amazing. In fact, this was one of the fun things, even when I was researching the Marian option, was just to see how much people spoke about her beauty. This isn't an accidental attribute that she has, but it's very specific and very important. And this is why I believe women are made beautiful. She's beautiful so that she can show others what God looks like, to show God's beauty. Saint Therese has this great quote about how Our Lady's so beautiful that you would want to die just so you could see her again. And every apparition, it was always the person that saw her said, she was the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. So that beauty, I think, is such a great idea for us to understand the kind of beauty that we're meant to cultivate and called to live and show others. But it was really funny because, of course, I wrote my book and I got it turned into the publisher, and then I went on a trip with my family, and I had never watched the Hallmark Channel before in my life, but somebody said, "Oh, watch the Hallmark Channel. It's pretty good." And this is before they went woke. But I watched a couple of movies with my daughters. We were in a hotel room. After a couple of episodes, I was like, wait a minute. These are the 3 things that surround every Hallmark movie. This desire to be known and loved, some desire to do the good, it's some woman going home and saving a library or something, and to be beautiful. I mean, she's beautiful while she's doing it, and the man that is entranced by her beauty and, all of that. So it just really struck me that, this is why Hallmark Channel is so popular, because they've tapped into this idea But ultimately, it comes back to who Our Lady is, because she's the only one that can do all of those things in the right way because of her connection with God. So anyway, that's sort of the abstract understanding of I think that why Our Lady can apply to all of our lives. But on a personal level, I think I had a devotion to Our Lady for a very, very long time. I was always intrigued by Lourdes and other apparition sites. But certainly my deep understanding of her love for her children did not happen until I had my own kids. I couldn't fathom that. And so that's been a great grace to really understand the way that she loves us and the way that she sacrifices for us. And I think, though, that every woman is called to spiritual motherhood. This isn't just for those of us that have children, but we all have this capacity to love others, to hold others, to be able to transform them through our love. And this is what we see with even within our bodies, where we are meant to carry things. You can see this in references to Our Lady. She's a vessel. She's the ark. All of these things. It's even the church is a she. The main part of the church, the nave, actually refers to navy or ship. This idea of carrying. So anyway, it's been really fun to sort of start looking at. We've spent so much time trying to figure out how women can be like men, that I've been trying to go back and help women see there's a whole nother side of femininity that we don't even understand anymore because we've been ignoring it. So I've been diving into that a lot, and certainly Our Lady has been incredibly instrumental in understanding that, just because there's so much that's been written about her over the centuries.
Cary Grass, thank you so much for being with us on this episode of the John Henry Weston Show.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
And I would encourage all of you to please go out and get the book and read it. The name of the book is The Anti-Mary Exposed: Rescuing the Culture from Toxic Femininity. Please go out and get it. Read it. It's an awesome book, and there's much, much in there that we haven't covered yet. God bless you, Cary. And God bless all of you. We'll see you next time. Hi, this is John Henry Weston, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News. I'm coming to you today because we want to be sure that we're communicating clearly with you, our loyal followers. Things are really heating up, as I'm sure you can see. Christians, conservative truth tellers are being targeted, are being banned from social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram at an alarmingly fast rate. They are attempting to suppress any narrative that does not fit that of the mainstream media. We knew this day would come. We have been warning everyone who would listen and attempting to build up alternative platforms to continue to reach you. We have established ourselves on all sorts of platforms I'm going to explain in a minute, but the most important thing to do is come direct to lifesitenews.com, because there we will always be. But we've also established ourselves on platforms like Parler and MeWe, and our videos can be found on Rumble as well. We would love to see each of you on those platforms too, as they are not censoring or suppressing the truth that we are sharing every single day. More than these alternative social media platforms, we highly encourage you to subscribe to our email newsletter. We have really built up a large list of loyal readers on our email marketing platform, and we have prepared several backup plans for, well, I want to say if, but it's really when, we are removed from our current platform as well. Additionally, I really encourage you, as I said before, to make it a regular habit to go directly to lifesitenews.com. Make it your homepage. While all of these different platforms are an excellent way to curate your news, going directly to our website means that you will never encounter any censorship or sudden loss of LifeSite News reporting. Here's the thing. We will never stop sharing the truth. We founded this organization with the mission to be the life, family, and culture source for men and women who seek to know the truth. We have established a track record of honest reports, and this will never stop, even with censorship happening around the globe. Again, I'm encouraging you to join us on Parler, MeWe, Rumble, and on our email list. You can find all the direct links in the description of this video. May God bless you and keep you, and we are so thankful that you've chosen to follow and support LifeSite News. I'm John Henry Weston, co-founder and editor-in-chief of LifeSite News.